Oh boy, we're in for something real fun today. Ticketmaster continues the trend of the two-part premiere, where we get to know a little bit more about the main characters, with one exception to it. The story has Twilight receiving an invitation to a party and is allowed to bring a +1 with her, which, of course, has got to be one of her 5 friends that she's made in the previous episode. So basically there's 2 tickets, Twilight has 5 friends, and you can probably guess what happens from there. Sure enough, each one of the main 6 gets to tell us a little bit as to why they would like to go to this party, which is, by the way, the Great Galloping Gala, and would then provide Twilight with something in the hopes to become Twilight's +1. Rainbow Dash would give Twilight a nice spot under the sun, Applejack gives Twilight a huge chunk of food that she's baked, Rarity shoves Twilight into a harness of some sort, and the episode would just kind of go on like that. It's a very simple story, especially when compared to the 2-part premiere, but despite that, I was honestly having a lot of fun with this one. I got a few good laughs watching it due to how batshit crazy it can be at some points. Twilight is constantly being shoved all over the place by her friends over this ticket. She doesn't get a single moment of rest. She has to pick some pony to take with her to the party right here, right now. It's honestly pretty hilarious and I love every second of it. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that I don't have issues with this. Ticketmaster has a tendency to repeat itself quite a few times during its runtime. The episode goes from one character to another, you get an idea of what it is that they want to be doing at the party, like Applejack wants to sell food, Pinkie Pie just wants to be in it for fun and games, Rarity wants to meet her Prince Charming, and if you've seen the 2-part premiere, you probably have a good idea of what the others are hoping to do. So this episode is clearly designed to give you a better understanding of who these characters are. And for that purpose, this episode just did job just fine. There is plenty to know about these characters, what they're capable of, and what they do in their lives. And this could be a very good place to start if that's what you're interested in. I honestly found this a lot better than the Friendship is Magic 2-part premiere as a whole. So here's my recommendation. If you want to get a good understanding of who these characters are, watch Friendship is Magic Part 1. Skip over Friendship is Magic Part 2 unless you're very interested in the story in that episode with Nightmare Moon and everything, and watch Ticketmaster after watching Friendship is Magic Part 1. You will get a very good understanding of who these characters are, and frankly, you will be getting a much more entertaining package than Friendship is Magic Part 1 and Part 2 together. Even though I do feel like Ticketmaster can be a little bit predictable, I still think that this is a very solid episode, especially for newcomers to the show. The show has never really been all that shy to take on some more serious topics every once in a while, burnout being the first one that they will be talking about. The episode? Applebox season. Applejack has the task to take out every single one of these apples out of every single one of these apple trees during the so-called Applebox season, with one slight handicap. That handicap being her brother, who appears to be so badly injured he won't be able to get any of this work done, meaning that Applejack has either one of 2 options. She can either do all of this by herself or ask her friends for help. She decides to do all of this work by herself, which results in her, well, I'll let the following footage speak for itself.
It's so bright and shiny and I sure do look funny. Oh! What on earth is that pony doing?
All of this doesn't quite seem to be helping her with her everyday life either, as she's also supposed to be helping out some of her friends in this episode, like Rainbow Dash, who wants to perform one heck of a trick, and Fluttershy with animals. All of the activities that she was supposed to be helping her friends with end up in complete and total disaster, because Applejack just simply is not capable of doing much of anything in this state. Now, if you've dealt with this exact issue yourself, you probably have a very good idea of what this is like to experience. Applejack is both mentally and physically tired, and it definitely shows in everything that she does. I mean, it's pretty clear that she didn't really get all that much sleep this episode, and I reckon that this would be quite similar to what a real burnout would be like. Now, this, of course, is a cartoon. It's a bit exaggerated to be a lot more enjoyable, something that you can have a good laugh at and whatnot, but I think that this is still a rather realistic portrayal of what a burnout is like. On top of that, I also just find it quite funny to watch. I mean, Applejack just constantly getting herself into scenarios she really does not want to be in at this stage, and her constantly managing to make a giant mess of everything. It is just as relatable as it is fun. Applebox Season is just a really fun and relatable episode, and I love it to bits. One of my favorite mythical creatures is the Griffon. You know, this half-eagle, half-lion monstrosity? So Griffon the Brush-Off was certainly an episode that I really wanted to like. It features a Griffon for the very first time on this show, which, in my honest opinion, is pretty exciting. Especially because Griffons aren't exactly the friendliest creatures in a lot of fantasy franchises, so I figured Friendship is Magic could have made a pretty big difference. Sadly, that is not exactly what happened here. Griffon the Brush-Off has a Griffon be about as jerkish as you could possibly make one. It isn't a bad episode per se, but it is one that gets on my nerves a lot. So then, let's discuss the Griffon in the room, shall we? The Griffon in question is an old friend of Rainbow Dash called Gilda, who lives in the town of Griffonstone. They haven't seen each other for many years, and so she decides to pay a visit to Ponyville to have a good time with her. Only to then be revealed that she... how do I put this? She's a bit of a bitch. Okay, before I can really get into the main plot of this episode further, I feel like there is a little something in the beginning of this episode that we should discuss for a moment. So this episode started off with Pinky and Rainbow just having a good time together. They were pulling some fun pranks on their friends for a good laugh. There's nothing particularly spectacular about it, it's just a silly, fun little montage that is showing some growth in their friendship, and they are just having a good time. It's really nice to see and I like it. Especially considering that earlier in this episode they couldn't really get along very well. In fact, Rainbow was actively trying to get away from Pinky. So this montage was certainly a very nice thing to see in this episode. Sadly, all good things come to an end, as Gilda would soon come along to screw it all up, being mean to every pony, stealing, and probably the worst of all, making Fluttershy cry. I will frickin' hurt the scum who lets that precious Pegasus cry. Ahem. Sorry about that. It goes without saying that I am not a very big fan of Gilda as a character. Now I will say this, Gilda being a bad girl like this doesn't necessarily have to be such a big deal. There's plenty of other girls like this in other shows, so it should be pretty okay, right? Well, yeah, on paper, it sure can be. But Gilda is a very special kind of frustrating. You see, for a character like this to work, especially in a show like Friendship is Magic, a character like this shouldn't just be a bully for the sake of being a bully, hello bad seeds. It honestly gets to a point where all I want to do is just punch her. Pinky does see all that is happening right in front of her, and Gilda is going to get some very well-deserved punishment, which involves numerous pranks to be pulled on her, and Rainbow tells Gilda to get out because she doesn't support any of the things that Gilda does. And with her being abusive towards Pinky, stealing from others and making the purest soul in the universe cry, that is truly satisfying to see. And honestly, the pranks themselves are also freaking hilarious. But even with all that, I can't say I really like this episode all that much. Gilda being so unbelievably unpleasant was a very big factor of me just getting infuriated with the whole thing. Not helping is the fact that she takes up a very good chunk of the episode, meaning that we get to see a lot of her bad behavior. Seeing Pinky's revenge on her was nice, but it wasn't quite enough for me to make this whole experience any better. The introduction to the Griffons has been very rough as a result. Here's hoping it'll get better from here. Only 6 episodes into the series and I've already gotten to one where I just want to punch my fist through my monitor. Ghostbusters is the absolute definition of unpleasant and infuriating. Alright, let's just get this over with, shall we? This episode introduces us to 3 new characters: Trixie, Snivs, and Snails. Trixie, who plays a relatively big role in Friendship is Magic as a whole, comes to Ponyville to have a little magic show. The citizens of Ponyville seem to rather enjoy the show, and her little story where she supposedly had defeated what's called an Ursa Major. Think of it as a bear of sorts with some kind of galaxy pattern sprayed on top of it. However, the main 6 don't seem to be very fond of it. In fact, all that they really want is for Trixie to buck off, and they decide that the best thing to get Trixie out of there is to show what they can do, trying to look better than Trixie. So basically they are trying to get rid of a show-off by being bigger show-offs themselves, which would make them look worse than Trixie because of how incredibly hypocritical it is. I'm sorry, what? Okay, look, I am not here to defend anything that Trixie is doing throughout this entire thing. I myself am not very fond of someone boasting about anything that they have accomplished or boasting about how amazing they are. Trixie is constantly doing this in her magic show, and she uses Sniffs and Snills as her literal slaves in one scene. These two, by the way, seem to be pretty big fans of hers too, making her look even more like a prick than she already would be. However, the main 6 trying to prove that they are better than Trixie in front of every pony, and Spike constantly encouraging Twilight to do so as well, just leaves a very bad taste in my mouth because of how hypocritical it all is. The way it's all put together makes it seem like I'm supposed to agree with the main 6 about this, but honestly, I would much rather side with Trixie on this. A character who, by the way, I can't stand because of how annoyingly full of herself she is and how she's willing to lie about defeating an Ursa Major. Speaking of the Ursa Major, Sniffs and Snills do eventually wake one up from the Everfree Forest where one lives and guide it to Ponyville to cause some mayhem so that they could see Trixie defeat it. It is at this moment that Trixie confesses it's all a lie, and Twilight comes in to save the day, after which Trixie would soon leave Ponyville. The scene with the Ursa Major was honestly my favorite of the whole episode, but that's mainly because there is very little dialogue in it and we mostly just got to enjoy some pretty visuals. Other than that though, there wasn't all that much good for me to enjoy in this one. Right off the bat, I found Trixie to be one of the most irritated characters that I've ever seen. Not only does she have a hell of an annoying voice, but everything about her attitude just doesn't sit right with me. It's probably no surprise that the main 6 didn't help manners. It's one thing to want to shut someone up because you think that they are being a show-off, but it's another thing entirely when you're being a ginormous hypocrite in this situation and do the exact thing that the performer is doing, which is boasting about your talents, essentially. Everything about this episode just makes me very angry, which is a response that I don't often get from many My Little Pony episodes. If anything, an episode could leave me slightly frustrated at worst. Most of the times, I would leave a lesser episode with a mild frown, sometimes a facepalm, but that's really it, honestly. This episode, however, just made me want to punch every character in it in the face. The only character I wouldn't want to punch is Twilight, because she at the very least was trying to be somewhat reasonable, unlike any other character in this. Which, considering that we're only 6 episodes in, is not a good look on them.